It is time to stop this stupidity, and to help you, there's the NASA photograph last August of the ice cap, the northern ice caps, and there is the NASA photograph this year of the ice caps. It is increased by 60% in 1 year. Leading American scientists are now saying we are going into a period of between 15 and 30 years of global cooling. We may have made one of the biggest, stupidest collective mistakes in history by getting so worried about global warming. You can reverse this in the next 7 or 8 months. You can bring down people's taxes. If you don't, they'll vote on it in the European elections of next year.
Mr Farage shows that populists are sometimes obscurantists. 99% of the science, Mr Farage, believes that this climate change exists as a result of human activity. 99% of scientists. Of course there are always people that are paid to say the opposite. But to pretend, as you pretend, that again...
The following presentation is controversial and may be offensive to some audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
You mentioned the markets and what the message from Mother Nature. You were on Bloomberg TV and said that the largest risk ever to the markets is global climate change. What do you mean by that?
Well, there are $7 trillion worth of carbon assets on the books of multinational energy companies today. There's another 14 trillion owned by sovereigns like the governments in the Persian Gulf region. But just to take the public companies, the valuation of those companies and their assets is now based on the assumption that all of those carbon assets are going to be sold and burned. And they're not. The global scientific community has just reaffirmed that no more than a third of them can ever possibly be burned without destroying the future. And we're already seeing downward pressure on the valuation of these assets, and people are under pressure to divest from those stocks because they see the moral consequences. But
wow, we have Al Gore, the complete criminal, piece of garbage, rivaled only by Bill Clinton as perhaps the biggest crook in at least decades in Washington. Now, for those of you who don't remember the criminal activities of Bill Clinton, I suggest you do some research. There's several documentaries. I mean, the guy clearly had dozens, if not hundreds of people killed throughout all his scams as governor of Arkansas and even as president. Anyway, Al Gore, as you know, is a complete piece of garbage. He has become really a crypto Jew. I could go into a whole piece on Al Gore that would last several hours, but let me just kind of briefly state that Al Gore, of course, he had this media company he created, was bought out, and Al Gore, if you'll look into it, at first he wasn't, no one would let him in, the media. Then he aligned himself with some media Jews, and of course he had already created some arrangements with Jews before. He had shown his ability, his willingness to become a crypto Jew, and he was involved with Google and all these other criminal companies. And then of course he also had his climate change scam, of which he stands to make a huge fortune off this complete scam, which is not true. Global warming is a complete scam. And you had this guy, he makes this stupid documentary, he wins a Nobel Peace Prize, and he's basically telling everyone how he was involved in early research. Complete idiot. He has no scientific background at all. So who are you going to believe, folks? You're going to believe someone who is a proven con artist, proven liar, piece of shit, fraud, scam artist, who has created many companies and invested large sums of money behind this whole climate change scam, so he stands to benefit. as well as, of course, it brings in the whole political system, which stands to tax people, steal their money from this whole carbon credit situation. Or you're going to believe someone who has no vested interest in whether or not there's climate change or not. Someone who has spent 12 years in college and graduate school taking coursework in chemistry, in physics, in biochemistry, who has done energy research, who has done research on oil, who has done research on alternative energy. And I, of course, was doing that 2 decades ago. Anyway, who are you going to believe, folks? You know, I'm so sick and tired of seeing these idiots out there. You might be one of them, who listens to all the bullshit, who reads a bunch of bullshit on climate change, and then you think that you somehow have some type of a view that should be listened to. You think that you can express your view that's credible. You think it's a credible view on climate change. Listen, if you haven't studied in detail chemistry and physics, specifically chemistry, you really don't have a clue, and you're not going to have a clue if you don't really understand core science. Earth science is not enough. Okay, that's high school science. If you don't understand how to conduct scientific research, if you don't understand how to investigate things on a scientific basis, if you don't have a scientific foundation, then you're not going to understand whether or not climate change is real, and that is a fact. Okay? Physical sciences, chemistry, physics. If you don't have that background, then I suggest that you pay attention to those who do have those backgrounds, who are not funded by government money, who don't stand to make money either way, don't have investments either way.
Just in terms of markets, these are like the subprime mortgages. These are subprime carbon assets. The subprime mortgages had an artificial value based on the assumption that these people who couldn't make a down payment
would never default on their loans.
Would never default.
No one ever does.
Because somehow if you bundled them together and securitized them and sold them into the global market, the risk would be magically eliminated. Well, that was an illusion, a self-serving illusion for those who were selling them to unwitting buyers. But when it was examined more closely, they were suddenly and massively repriced. And
can you believe this, people? You've got this guy, this hypocrite, talking about self-serving illusion. This guy's the biggest self-serving piece of garbage to come around in years. And he actually has the nerve to equate fossil fuels, the fossil fuel market, with the subprime. Al Gore, you're a fucking idiot. You're a fucking idiot. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You're a loser. You're a con artist. And you belong in the electric chair with Bill Clinton, with George Bush, with Obama, with all these motherfuckers in Washington. Every single last one of these bastards in Washington now, previously in Washington over the past 30 years. You all belong in the electric chair. Okay? You're a lying piece of shit.
that's what triggered the global credit crisis and detonated the Great Recession. Well, the subprime carbon assets similarly have an even more absurd overvaluation because, again, they're not going to be burned. They cannot be burned and will not be burned.
Subprime carbon assets? You fucking con artist piece of shit. What the fuck are you talking about? Subprime carbon assets? Listen, genius. Newsflash, fossil fuels are not all used for combustion. You stupid pinhead. Haven't you ever heard of the chemicals industry? Folks, let me explain something. Of course, I wrote about this extensively in America's Financial Apocalypse. Crude oil and even natural gas is used for a variety of basic building blocks, building products. It's vital to the chemicals industry. And you see crude oil components in a variety of items, hundreds of items. So it's not about necessarily combustion. It doesn't have to be about combustion.
At what point does the market recognize that this is an illusion? Bubbles, we have a carbon bubble.
A carbon bubble. Wow.
And bubbles.
Carbon bubble, everyone. Oh my God. The only bubble is your head, which is getting ready to pop. Carbon illusion, everyone. Did you hear that? Carbon bubble.
Will not be burned. At what point does the market recognize that this is an illusion? Bubbles, we have a carbon bubble.
So he's saying that, the market doesn't understand that there's a carbon bubble. He understands it, so he's waiting for the market. Al Gore is ahead of the curve. He knows more than the market. He knows more than sophisticated investors. He's calling it a carbon bubble. Boy, this guy. This is the problem with our controlled bullshit corporate Zionist media. They air these charlatans, these snake oil salesmen that end up brainwashing the unintelligent American public, and there's no one that's ever positioned on the other end to challenge them. I mean, do you think Al Gore would be able to stand on his own 2 feet for more than 3 seconds if he were confronted by even the lowest level of scientist or even investor that understands what's going on?
Carbon bubble.
And Bob.
I mean, look at Task. I mean, he's trying to not laugh. Aaron Task is a fucking idiot, but even he realizes. Even he realizes.
Bubbles. We have a carbon bubble.
A carbon bubble. Right?
And bubbles, by definition, involve a lot of asset owners and investors who don't see what in retrospect becomes blindingly obvious.
Are you talking about, in retrospect becomes blindingly obvious? You might be talking about NAFTA, the destructive plan that you pitched. You were the pitch man for NAFTA. You remember that, Al Gore? Of course, why don't you ask Al Gore now about NAFTA? He'll say it's a great thing, right? He'll say it was a great thing. This is the pitch man for NAFTA, people. NAFTA has destroyed America. And it hasn't helped Mexico. It's destroyed Mexico. Probably NAFTA has benefited Canada more than it's hurt Canada. And of course, the reason why primarily is because Canada has pretty strong participation in labor unions. So they're not going to allow NAFTA to screw them. But of course, NAFTA has also provided some short-term, superficial improvements in many of the Southeast Asian nations. But of course, those are only short-term, superficial improvements, and we're going to see the downside of those so-called improvements here over the next few years. China is already beginning to see them. The complete environmental catastrophe that's been created in China due to the so-called free trade, the unfair trade, which has basically resulted in massive toxic dumping in China. Let's ask Al Gore, Mr. Green, if he's happy with the fact that free trade, which he basically pitched, he opened the door for America, has resulted in the complete dumping of toxic waste into Southeast Asia and Mexico. Al Gore, are you happy about that? You piece of garbage. Somebody please punch him in the face. Please. I mean, you're probably going to go to jail for it, but can you imagine what a hero you'd be to millions of people to punch this con man, loser? You have to understand, this guy is responsible for impoverishing millions of people from his scams.